Hello out there, and taking a look at a couple brand new Spydercos today, and what we have is an extension of the Efficient line, with down below the larger version that is called the Emphasis, and then up above is the Insistent. And these two knives, I'm not going to say they're a long time coming or it's something that was like really anticipated, but these two just make a lot of sense for Spyderco to put out. When you think about the more budgety kind of stuff, the more economical stuff, like the Tenacious line that has 4 different knives in it, it only makes sense for a knife like the Efficient to get counterparts in the larger and smaller size range. And so now Spyderco has released them and given us, the opportunity to really choose which size works for us. And I've got to say, with these two blades, we've got when I think about the design of these knives, I think that they're very intentional with the kind of knife that they're making and what Spyderco is trying to produce and what they don't really care about. So we'll get into all the aspects of that and just how this knife is definitely going to fit a lot of people's needs and check a lot of boxes. But then there's some boxes that just don't get checked at all, and that just means it won't be for everybody. But let's get started with a couple size comparisons. Unfortunately, I do not have the regular Efficient just to put in between these two to give you a really good idea about it, but I can show you guys, starting with the Emphasis, how this one stacks up next to the Paramilitary 2. You can see that the Emphasis here fills almost the entire frame. So we're looking at right around 8 1/4 inches of total length, and the Paramilitary 2 actually lines up almost perfectly with it. So these are just about the exact same overall length. And if we bring in the Tenacious, and maybe this one would be a better comparison with the larger Resilience overall, but if we bring in the Tenacious, you can see a much longer overall length for the Emphasis, but the cutting edge is longer on the Tenacious, which is interesting, right? What that gives us is a different kind of blade to handle ratio and a different feel in the hand, and the ergos are going to play a huge part in what makes this knife for me a big win. So pretty cool there. And when we move to the smaller one, it's actually the same. They just shrunk it down, so you'd expect the same kind of comparison. So here is the Insistent, an overall length of, let's take a look at that. What is this? Right around 6 inches even almost. Yeah, a little bit more than 6 inches. And when you bring in the Ambitious, which it compares pretty similarly to, it is longer overall by about 1/2 inch, but it does have a shorter cutting edge, same kind of thing. So the way that this knife fits in the hand is definitely going to have some big improvements if you're using it for extended cutting versus something like the Ambitious. Another size comparison that we can bring in just to give a look at something a little bit different is the CRKT Squid. If we're talking about legality and just having a short cutting edge or blade length, for legal reasons, these two are pretty comparable in that regard. But if you just look at them next to each other, there's a very significant difference in how these knives are built and what you can expect as far as sturdiness, robustness. I mean, the thickness of these liners, it's yeah, pretty nice, big, chunky beater, and I'm digging it. I'm digging the whole idea of it. So let's bring them both out, and I think for the most part in this video I'll just have them both on screen at the same time because it just sort of makes sense. We are talking about very, very similar ideas and concepts here. The 8CR13 MOV is our blade steel for both of these knives, the whole line. And for some people, that's just not a good thing. Some people really don't like 8CR, especially when we talk about the price points of these. You are going to be able to find better value, I think, if you're looking for a good steel at a cheaper price. So there's that. But for an EDC kind of knife, in my experience, it works out just fine. So I don't have a problem with 8CR. Comparing 8CR between companies, I've always sort of thought that Spyderco, either they just get it super sharp, better than people do, better than other people, so it performs better out of box, or I don't know if their heat treat is better, but I've always just felt it was slightly improved when I got it from Spyderco. So take that with a grain of salt. I'm not sure how much that is worth, but that's sort of how I see it. The blade shape is agreeable, really good for EDC tasks. As you shrink it down, it does sort of get a little bit odd, and we'll get to that in just a second, but let's take a look at this one. Yeah, really just sort of a classic, almost leaf-shaped blade from Spyderco. Big fan of that. There is this slight little like curvature down as you get to the end here. So it does look like a little bit of a recurve. And then one thing that might be a little nitpicky that I always see on their budget lines or economy lines, I don't really consider these budget since they're over 30 bucks, but on all of them, even the Tenacious series, they just sort of end. You know, they just stop. It's not really the cleanest like plunge grind, but I don't know, that's just something I'm noting. It's not anything that ever really bothers me functionally, but it's something that's always there. And then when we take a look at the Insistent with this, that like that area is just a little bit more, like it's a little bit more of an odd kind of ending with this recurve. And it's a very slight recurve, but it's there. So I don't know how sharpening will be long term with this, if it will be a bit of an issue, but you can see it's just not the cleanest finish. And when it was grinding, actually the finish right here looks like it got hit because it's inconsistent with the rest of the blade. So fit and finish, not exactly perfect, but there are some improvements with these knives over the Efficient, at least in my memory. You know, from what I remember of the Efficient, the two things that are a lot better about these knives than that, the first one is the jimping. The jimping is really precise versus the first Efficient, and so the lock-in capability is, I mean, spot on. These knives are excellent in hand, and the jimping really helps with that. So when you take a look, and we'll just like go right into ergos, when you take a look at how this knife fits in my hand, I don't have large hands, but if you did, it's still going to be pretty darn good. And you have multiple grip configurations because of this forward choil. I mean, I just really, really like the way this one feels. And if we talk about the PM2, which we compared earlier, being just one of like the classic, excellent in-hand Spydercos, this really fits the same vein as that. Just that it is wonderful to have in your hand. And if you take a look at the lines, it sort of feels a little bit like a Shaman mixed with a Native too. You know, so it's sort of Spyderco like comparing, or not comparing, but like combining some of the best things that they do into one affordable kind of knife. So yeah, I mean, they crushed it with the ergos on this. And then same thing on this knife. I mean, if you're going to pick a knife between this and the Ambitious to like cut with for a long period of time, no doubt, this is the one that you want to get in hand. And in addition to that, the G10 has, I feel like it's a slightly higher level of traction than the original Efficient did. And unfortunately, I don't have just like the regular G10 for either of these to compare it to. I've always liked the G10 on the Tenacious though, so it's not going to be like one's all that better than the other, but I do just feel like it's a little bit stepped up with these two new models. Other big pluses, very easy to disassemble, and you'll see some weight relief from some pictures that I put in, a lot of interior milling and machining, so just to cut as much weight as possible, which is sort of like the same as, you know, the previous things that they've done, like on this line. Just because you do have such thick liners, you want to try to cut the weight whenever you can. So, you know, very intentional, again, with what they're doing and where they're spending their time. You know, not as much time being spent right here, maybe a little bit more in here just to make it, you know, not just one big heavy chunk of stainless steel and G10. As we move on back, one big difference between this and the previous model, the Efficient, is that we do have wire clips on these. They are deep carry, so that is definitely a big plus. We take a look at them. Closed position. It is reversible too, so that's pretty cool. And with the lanyard hole being, you know, further up in between the rest of the hardware, it's not going to get in the way, which is a very smart thing from Spyderco. I wish they did this more often with more of their models. Another thing that I like about this is just T8 hardware all the way across. So that's what you're going to need. Actually, T9 worked too, so I'm not sure 100% what the intention is, but T8, T9, both of it works. Very easy to disassemble and get in there. When I was looking at it, I was sort of surprised to see that we had like a black plastic washer inside. So sort of odd, but the action is very nice and snappy. Strong detent, good Spyderco flick. Nice, loud, authoritative, exactly what you would want and expect, and sort of similar to the Tenacious line. So, not really in like free drop territory, but pretty darn sweet if you ask me. But the thing that I wanted to take a minute and talk about, the discussion aspect of this, is this knife really having an understanding of what it is and who it's going to be for. You know, this knife is not going to be for everybody. We're talking about price points that are not as budget as other budget stuff. We're talking about 40 bucks for the Insistent and almost like, what, 51 for the Emphasis. And when I heard that, I was thinking, geez, that's a lot. You know, I remember the Ambitious being like $30-something when I bought it. And then I looked it up and I realized I bought the Ambitious in 2012 and prices have gone up. And so that's sort of where Spyderco is. You know, they're trying to make something more economical, but it's not going to compete with some of the other $40 knives where you can get upgraded steel or maybe a little bit more innovative or creative kind of design. You know, this is very simple. This is a simple knife, thick liners, G10, black G10. It's a beater, it's a user, and it's going to really take care of people in that capacity, provided that, you know, you're good with the 8CR13 MOV steel and you're good sharpening it and maintaining it, which for me, I think is a no-brainer. I think it's just fine for that. So, you know, if you're looking for anything like bang for your buck or a little bit more innovation or fancy kind of stuff, this isn't the knife for you. But, you know, some of the stuff that I talked about with like it being easy to disassemble, the amount of like machining work on the inside to cut that weight, the ergo aspect, the jimping, blade to handle ratio, that kind of stuff. When you're thinking about these kind of things, and if you value them and being able to use a knife, you know, that has these qualities, then this is a really good one to go with. You know, and that's sort of the thing that when I did the review of the Efficient, you know, years ago, and I did a follow-up about it, it's the sort of the thing that I was missing. I couldn't put my finger on exactly what I meant and why I didn't love the knife that much, even though I gave it a positive review. And that's really what it is. It just is so simple, and you're paying maybe more money than you think you should for something simple. But when you're looking at it as a tool that's going to last and get, you know, give you some mileage, then I think for some people it's going to be worth it. You know, and if you're one of the people who's going to say in the comments, no, I wish it was an upgraded steel, or I wish it was this or that, like, you're absolutely right, and it's just not the knife for you. Doesn't mean it's bad, doesn't mean it's good, but I think for the people who are looking for something like this, it's going to be an absolute home run, and it's a chance to get a pretty darn good quality Spyderco at a price that, even though it's not budget, it's still cheaper than other Spydercos that you're going to find out there. So that's it, guys. That is the first look at these two knives. Let me know your thoughts on this line. What do you think about these versus the Tenacious line? Which one is the one that you would go with? All right, any other questions, comments, complaints, suggestions, let me know down below. I really appreciate it. Take care, and I will talk with you soon.